Hello, Adab, Namaste. I am Manoj Singh. On behalf of the DC South Asian Arts Council, I welcome you to the DC South Asian Literary Festival series. Tonight's discussion is with author Indira Ahluwalia about her book, Fast Forward to Hope. Before we start tonight's discussion, let's take a moment to remember all our people who are going through tough times here and in South Asian countries due to COVID. Our thoughts and prayers are with you. I also want to take a moment to thank and be grateful of frontline workers, health professionals for working 24 hours under tough conditions and trying to keep us safe. To help them and our fellow citizens, please get vaccinated and follow CDC and local guidelines. Our thank you and appreciation to also all the scientists who worked day and night on getting us vaccines within a year. We are really grateful. Now, I want to introduce to you tonight's moderator, Niharika Chibergio. She is a United States civil servant. She is a prize-winning published poet and a short story writer. Niharika speaks several languages, but writes in English and sometimes in Japanese or even Hindi. She holds a BA and MA in Japanese language and literature from the Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi, India. She also holds an MA in International Relations from the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies in Washington, D.C. Here is Niharika.
Thank you very much, Manoj, and thank you for the kind introduction. Good evening, good morning, everyone. As Manoj said, my name is Niharika Chibergio, and I want to thank the DC South Asian Arts Council for holding space on this first Sunday in June to acknowledge National Cancer Survivors Day. I am delighted and honored to introduce to you Indira Ahluwalia. Indira is a senior executive and trusted advisor with over 25 years of experience founding, leading, and advising organizations and coaching leaders to strengthen equity, effectiveness, and excellence. She's a thought leader and sought-after speaker on topics related to entrepreneurship, leadership and management, inclusion and equity, and survivorship. Indira holds a BS in psychology with distinction from George Mason University. And I was really thrilled to learn that she also holds an MA in international relations from the University of Chicago. Today, I will be talking to Indira about her new book, Fast Forward to Hope, Choosing to Build the Power of Self. Welcome, Indira, and congratulations on the book. I think I'd like to start by asking you to please read the first couple of paragraphs in your book's introduction, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you so much, Niharika. It is such an honor to be here with you today. I'm so grateful to the DC South Asians Arts Council, as much as to Manoj and Geetaji for creating this platform to talk about our lives in crisis, certainly, but also with gratitude. Thank you so much for allowing me to start at the beginning of the book as we start this dialogue. So this is really the beginning of the book. As I read it, I'm excited to share it with you. Dr. Rodney Butch and I had developed an unusual bond. It wasn't common for the head of radiology and a patient to engage, let alone be able to have candid conversations about the patient's condition. After my fourth or fifth PET scan, we stood in the corridor to talk for a moment. The effects of the sedative I had taken that morning to get through the scan hadn't fully faded. Dr. Butch was telling me he had shared my first set of PET CT pictures from May 2007 and the subsequent one from December 2007 with his class. He had then posed them a question. What is the prognosis of the patient in the two scans? He had my attention now. Why was he showing my scans to his class? I panicked immediately, wondering how bad my scans must have been for them to have been made an example. Oh my God, I implored God as I called his name in a silent prayer, Vaheguru. Even as my thoughts raced uncontrollably, Dr. Butch calmly related his class's response. The students were unanimous in their interpretation. They said that the May patient was not likely to live, but they were optimistic that the December patient had a good prognosis. Dr. Butch said that it shocked his students to learn that the scans were of the same person, that the first patient had lived. Dr. Butch shared that he had wanted to use my scans to help his students understand, not to predetermine outcomes and how they conduct the art of medicine. I was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer and extensive growth metastases throughout my skeleton soon after my first PET CT scan on May 23, 2007. At that time, I was in a bad marriage and had 2 children under 6. DTS, the company I led, born from my passion for equality, was reeling from an unexpectedly bad year in 2006. I was already doing all I could to survive. I just knew that I still had so much more ahead of me.
Thank you so much, Indira. You know, I read your book and I was telling you earlier that I felt absurdly ill-equipped to have this conversation with you.
I'm sure.
I have learned so much in the past 24 hours about what this means. I've put myself in your shoes. I've tried to understand. I don't think I will ever come to a full understanding, but this conversation, I hope, will help me and help others who are going through this, who have never gone through this, who know somebody who's gone through this or going through this. So, you know, as I was reading this introduction, and you stopped at a very good place in it, after this, Dr. Butch said something to you that changed everything, possibly. What was that, and what happened?
Now, I really appreciate the opportunity to start with how the journey progressed with the kind words, really the words of a person who was fully equipped to know my realities. He said something that I still struggle to understand. He said that if I could figure out, he tells me in background, he says, I often tell people there are bottles that he can use for different people, that there are opportunities that sometimes people do have to come out of difficult situations, including cancer. So he took that bottle analogy a little bit further, and he said, if I could figure out what was in my bottle, more people would live. And it's a very, very powerful, loaded, double-edged sort of comment, right? Because it was a few months after the diagnosis, my disease had started to show stability. It was very fresh still. And much as I understood intellectually what the diagnosis was, and I'd lived in the fear of it, I hadn't quite comprehended how close death was. But even when he gave me that, he also gave me the opportunity to understand that something within me was working. And that I held on to that. I mean, I held on to the sense that the answer that I gave him, that it was faith, was what was going to carry me through.
And so I while reading and, while listening to you, I find you have these doctors who are your champions. You go through times that are just completely hopeless in terms of trying to find the right diagnosis, wondering what the prognosis is, being turned away because you're late for an appointment, and we'll get to that because that's a whole other thing. But yet you have your primary OBGYN doctor who, upon pronouncing this diagnosis and the gravity of it to you, holds your hands and says, promise me you will fight. You have your radiologist who, after these horrific looking PET scans, is saying, take your bottle so others can live. What does that do to you? What is that responsibility that it puts on you as somebody who was all of a sudden meant to be this, for lack of a better word, a mascot for someone who has to get it done and beat the odds? You have that little space to say, you know what, I'm done, I've had it.
Right. That really gives me pause, because it takes a while to accept being a mascot, right? It's very different from being a token, right? When you're a mascot, the responsibility is to cheer for the good of your team, for you to show the strength of your team, to motivate your team. You're not a statistic. You're not to make it a bad example, right? So the obligation to live is not just then for yourself.
Right?
It becomes, to your point, a responsibility. But in all truth, it's when you're going through it, when you're in the middle of it, those responsibilities are a little further out from the more immediate needs. And the immediate needs are what motivate you, or even, should we say, force you to go from task to task to survive. But I have to say, very early in the journey of going through the diagnosis, my cousin Kalpana in India, who's a publisher, said to me, start journaling, start writing about this, because you'll get something out of it, and maybe you can do something with it. So she planted a seed, but it took me these 14 years to understand what I've learned, to build my own spiritual and emotional strength, to manage my disease, to do my life's ongoing tasks, to get to this point of where I can accept the bigger responsibility.
It is, this again goes back to, and we'll talk about this more, why did you write the book? Why have you written it now? But we're talking about, you mentioned the management of your disease. And I know you read from the book about what it is that you had. I am not sure that our audience has had the chance to grasp that.
Mm-hmm.
So if I could ask you to look into the camera
Mm-hmm.
and tell us exactly what you were told you had and where you are now. How are you managing it? Is it like any other chronic disease management, or where are you now? But I want you to really bring it home for us what we're talking about here.
Fair enough. Diagnosis is it's a phase. It's not a moment. And so you incrementally learn what you're dealing with. And you start off from this place of knowing something doesn't feel right. Or maybe even before that, you have a pain, or you have something that gives you discomfort. It takes you to the next step of trying to investigate it. It takes you to one test. It gives you the opportunity to get some of the answer. And then you have to go for another test. And in my case, we started with pain, indescribable pain. Pain that at the age of 38 wasn't allowing me to walk. I was, and it built almost quietly. And you're busy and you keep moving through the pain till I realized climbing stairs was painful. Till I realized how incredible the hold that pain had was, the hold the pain had. And so we started investigating that pain. And, there was a herniated disc. Okay, got some good drugs. And then there was the situation where there's a pain that came, which is there was no lump in my breast. There was no other pain in the breast. But there was, and so that was also instructive for me in later times, right? That it's not always the standard symptoms. But from that situation that developed in my breast, which actually was a very live pain. It was a force of energy from the tip of my right nipple to my chest wall. And it was a rod, and it was intense, and it was live. And I couldn't pretend it wasn't there, right? And then there was a thickening under my right nipple. And the first biopsy said it wasn't invasive breast cancer, but there was breast cancer. But we're not really sure what kind and what we're going to do with it. So you get all this information together and quickly once you go through the 10 days of waiting for the biopsy results to come. You then move into a phase of more testing. And ultimately, regardless of what type of cancer it is, what stage of cancer it is, cancer evokes fear. And you're still at that point where you're prepared for the worst, but you don't understand what the worst is. So the diagnosis that I received, I would say, towards the end of May from the pains that started in October and November of the year before was advanced breast cancer with bone metastases. And it's widespread in my skeleton. I did 6 months of chemotherapy, and one drug, Herceptin, which had only been in the market for a little while, was the drug that could hold the cancer where it was. That drug is something I continue to take every 3 weeks through an IV as late as this past Friday. So with this diagnosis or with any kind of cancer, no matter the stage, vigilance has to become your best friend. And so monitoring is something that I'm grateful to be able to do, be it through the different types of CAT scans and MRIs and bone scans.
So you're on this medication that you found because a kind doctor, I believe in Maryland, after you had run from pillar to post, said that we can do this and you're not going to die because we can use this and we can do it. And then that was the game changer in the moment. But in my reading and sort of trying to understand how to approach this, how to put together the patient and the medical system, such as it is, and reading the accounts of other people, and there seems to be some synergy there, where you have this pain, this debilitating pain. You have some symptoms related to your breast, but they're not what one calls traditional sort of breast cancer lump issues. And then you're running around from doctor to doctor without a diagnosis, without necessarily requisite testing. And it's 4 or 5 months before you find out that this breast cancer has spread to your skeleton, but you were feeling that before you felt it in your breast. So there's there's a lot of conversation about medical providers not hearing what you were saying. And you have to keep becoming a self-advocate, saying, no, I know something is wrong. Please. And so where did you find, was it your OBGYN who was like, you know what, yes, something is wrong, let's investigate this further? Or how did it happen? How did things line up for you where you could start to see, even though it was horrifying, that there was a method to this and there was actually something going on that you had said all along was probably going on, that something is wrong?
You know, there isn't a book on it, right? There isn't, and yet there is a system. And we're also in a country where we have incredible hospital systems and incredible medical care. And everybody is doing their very best to support the patients, to find the diagnosis, to create the wellness that one seeks. You know, absolutely, the breast cancer had spread months before we detected it. A key lesson was, as we were doing the MRIs for my back, we were doing it without contrast. Had we done it with contrast, perhaps we would have seen more and understood the risks that I was now mired in. You know, I think also we're in a community where not just the South Asian community, but the American community, where medicine is accessible and advice is accessible. And so not only do you have the hospital systems that you can communicate through and find as you go from pillar to post, as you say, you find a step-by-step process, but you also have enough people that you can reach out to and say, what about and how should I? And my father had cancer. And it is a system, just as any other aspect of, you know, any other system. There is a system. And you have to learn to navigate it, to manage getting appointments, managing insurance, managing costs. And these are just the logistics of it. There is the additional aspect of negotiating your care, the idea of going for second opinions, of making sure that it's not a question of whether you trust your doctor, it's your life. It's really up to you to take the responsibility of not worrying about somebody else's ego, not worrying about feeling shy or inadequate about asking a question, about not thinking, can I use the word nipple when I'm talking about breast cancer, right? It's about saying, I want to get to a solution and I will take charge of this. Because you have to learn to make the system work for you.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up the bit about wondering whether you can say nipple when talking about an illness in a medical way. I wondered if I could say that out loud, and that's why you probably noticed I just kept it at breast, and even that I think is difficult. For people to understand, and men might cringe hearing about it. So, and you mentioned the South Asian community, and that's why we are here today also. And you have extended family here in the United States, and you have family back home. And how did that go in a culture where, what will people say, or, we don't air our dirty laundry in public, and this is a family thing. When you are in this crisis and what you need is to, in today's terms, crowdsource as much information as possible and reach out, as you said, without feeling shy, without just saying, hey, I have this, who can help me? How did you navigate that?
With truth, it's very simple when the mission is clear and you're not going to compromise on the mission. The second thing, in all honesty, is we had a conversation about this. I remember my mother saying to me very, very early, do you want to talk about this? Do you care if people know? And I thought about it, and absolutely, people give you such strength. They give you in that moment. And, I thought selfishly, honestly, in that moment when you hear, usko kuch ho gaya hai ya koi problem chal rahi hai, but you in that moment say a silent prayer, or you say a good word, or you say something that elicits positive energy. And why don't we want more of that, right? And it wasn't something to be ashamed about. If I'm not going to be shy about, let's say, getting an appendix out, why would I be ashamed about any other body part? Why would I need to feel a sense of, I want to say, I think some people take on a sense of responsibility for getting a disease and hiding. Take the sense of responsibility to beat it, not let it beat you down, and not let other people judge you for a disease for which you need support. Stigma is so important to address when you talk about disease. And if you think about what stigma is bias and it's judgment, all rolled into one. And it's a way of othering somebody. It's a way of making ourselves safer. So we're not tied to that bad luck or that bad news. We want to separate ourselves. And yet our first instinct is to give love. Our first instinct is to say that prayer, keep, sab theek ho jaye. So I feel like even with writing this book, I want to use the word cancer. I want to use the language that's needed for us to be honest about what needs to be addressed. It's only then can we get to the core of it. And so it's not necessarily about being bold. It's just normalizing the body, and not sexualizing it.
That's a very, very, astute thing for you to say in terms of normalizing and not sexualizing the body. And I'm sure we can have a whole other series of conversations about that. But, you mentioned, and I've throughout your book and in the way you are and the way you carry yourself and the way you speak, Vaheguru plays a huge part in this. And I want you to tell us about your relationship with God and your faith. You're a practicing Sikh, and how that played this really vital role in your journey, in your recovery process. And also for us to understand that, when people talk about faith, and I've, again, in my readings, I found that everybody who receives a crisis diagnosis of some sort has either returned to faith or renewed faith or just amped up their faith. And the negotiations with God, striking deals, it's not uncommon. So what was the deal that you struck with Vaheguru? And how did that help you? How did that give you a sense of purpose to going back to that responsibility that was placed on you as the mascot to fight and champion the cause so others might live? How did that all come together? What did it do for you?
I've been incredibly lucky, incredibly lucky. I think I must have been 5 or 6 when I realized Vaheguru was my imaginary friend. You don't get luckier than that. You don't have to play it out then. It's inbuilt in you. And it's in things small and it's in things big. And it becomes a way of life, right? It's a go-to place. It's a safe place. It's a place where you can be free to feel the fear and release it to a higher power. For me, it's Vaheguru. I believe deeply in this connection with this higher energy of good. If you have to put it into a structure or a framework, absolutely, the name of my God may be different than the name of your God. But or in somebody else's case, it may not be the name of a God. It may be just an energy or a belief system. But what I have found is humility and understanding we don't own and control it all allows us a little bit more freedom in the struggle. Because then we know that there may be somebody else or something else that can aid us, that can guide us, that we can fall back on. It's not necessarily a place where you go to blame, but it's certainly a place where you can go to get support in a way where for myself, it's been freeing. And so it ultimately, the connection with Vaheguru is really the direct connection to yourself, right? I find that we are so busy with our lives, especially in crisis, really. When we're working so hard to get to solving the problem, we don't connect to our own inner core. We don't connect to our own strength. And it's that higher energy through that vibration, that we're able to uplift ourselves. So absolutely, I think that has played a fundamental part in allowing me to stay positive. It's being positive can be intellectual till you own it spiritually. And so definitely faith has played a significant role. And in Sikhism, somebody posed this as a question recently to me. Seva is a key tenet. And so is the book a type of seva? I mean, is it a way for me to pay forward what I have learned? Is it a way for me to take what Dr. Butch gave me as a command, almost? Go figure this out. What obligation do I have to myself so that I can be a better mother, so I can be a better friend, so I can be a better daughter, because I'm then operating from honesty and truth. And it's, and the beauty of courage is it's not a constant. You're allowed to be scared. And that humility allows you that opportunity to not feel you can only be strong.
Thank you for that. We were talking like we're old friends.
Mm-hmm.
But, I want our audience to know that Indira and I met for the first time by phone 2 days ago. And we found that we have a lot more in common than not. And, the least of which is that we're both South Asian women, we're immigrants, we're moms, we're working moms. And so I want to talk to you about, this idea of strength as a working mom, who might be going through anything at all at any time, trying to keep all balls in the air and feeling like you're failing anyway because you're trying to get to work and there's traffic and you've got your colleagues waiting and there's a conference call and all of that, and then you're coming home and getting dinner on the table. So the definition of strength changes. As you've said, strength doesn't mean that you have to be what we say, himmat mai all the time. Just being able to get out of bed and getting dressed in the morning is a form of strength, and especially when you were sick. So, and you mentioned your children in this context. So, and I've wondered, as a mother too,
Yes.
reading your book, when did you decide that it was time to level with your kids? Because when this starts out, they're 3 and 5, and you're picking up toys and hugging them and making sure that they eat and get to bed, and bedtime is getting delayed, and they don't know why mommy has to keep going to New York all the time because she's getting tests. And so when was it time for you to tell them what they already knew?
Yeah, I love how you put that, because I think it's we think we have to tell our children. Uh, we think we have to make this grand announcement, and we have to have the talk, and we have to be prepared. And be it, my children have always guided me. I've learned from my niece and nephew and my son and daughter, and the kids in our sangha, they inspire me because they are so wise. They're wise in the ways of being truthful and honest more than perhaps we are. I think that there's an inherent understanding. Just as you know when something's not right in your body, you know when something's not right in your family. And whether that be cancer or a divorce or any other type of illness or financial challenge, we can't hide it from our children. I know that both my kids understand my vibration better than I know it intellectually. And they've seen it all, right? They've seen me through these last 14 years be in bed because I can't get up. And they've seen me sit in front of you here and now in a way saying that, I can be strong and I can do this. They've seen the full spectrum. And I think even when they were 3 and 5, there was an understanding by the way they asked their questions or the way they hugged a little longer, that I think it came to a point where I initially started thinking about sharing it with them in words they could understand, in words that meant, I have a backache, I cannot carry you, or I have to wear a wig because this bad medicine that I'm going to take is going to make my hair fall out. And isn't that funny? And eventually, as we got further along, maybe a year or two into it, when this was definitely under 10, still very young, I tapped Life with Cancer, which is a Fairfax County Hospital foundation that helps people who live with cancer to address these very kind of questions. What should I say to my child? And I talked with a counselor by the name of Jenny at the time, Jenny Eckert, who said, use the words. It was really powerful again, because when you tell a child, I have cancer, they have not previously associated fear with it. If you say to a child, I have cancer, that is new information. And how you share it. We've got a handle on this. We're figuring it out. I will always tell you the truth. I will always be with you. I will always do my best by you. Changes how they receive it.
That's very very pertinent to dealing with even the pandemic right now.
Mm-hmm.
And those of us who have children who might be younger, who are trying to make sense of all of this. Not to say that your experience is interchangeable, but Manoj started the program with reference to everything that's happened back home and all the loss that's taken place, and just having little kids process what's going on. And I think in our community, we tend to shield our children a lot. And so using the words and telling them, and I've found that having those types of conversation, for me personally, friends and family back home or extended friends and family will always tell me that I'm too American because I have, you talk to your child like an adult, bacha hai, let him be a bacha. Don't tell him all this.
Mm.
But it is important. And there are times where you have to. It doesn't force them to grow up necessarily, but it helps them understand.
I have to say, whether you tell them or not, you have to prepare them for life, right? You can shelter them only so much. Nobody's life is going to be without pain. Nobody's life is going to be without challenge. And much as we prepare our children to sit for a standardized test and study for their AP exams, or, coach them to do well in soccer, we should coach them to face challenge. My parents, like any other parents, sheltered us, my brother and me, with love. But we also had circumstances which happened in our family in terms of my dad's cancer, moving countries, starting over, where they were transparent. They spoke from, this is what we're going to do, and this may happen. This is what we need you to do. And did we grow up sooner? Did my kids grow up sooner? I think perhaps in certain ways, but I think they also, as children, have incredible defense mechanisms, and and PlayStation and social media that also keep them distracted. It allows them to they can filter in how much they need, right? But if we don't tell them, their source of information may be biased towards what you would have told them, biased or different than what you would have.
Right.
So you wouldn't have been able to help them understand the message you could have given them.
Well, it seems like we can keep talking forever because we have our beverages here, and you and I are having a chat, and it's easy to forget that we have this whole audience out there who's chomping at the bit to ask questions. So I'm going to pause for a second and take a question or two from the audience. So one question we have is, it goes back to the title of your book. And, I want to tell everyone, please buy the book, read the book. It changed my life, not in a minute, but in an incremental way. I think this is that zor ka jhatka dheere se laga kind of thing where you can't process it in a minute. I had to stop because I internalized it so much to the point where every time Waheguru was mentioned, I said thank you to him because it felt like Indira has a path forward. So, and I felt like I was living that with you. So, I encourage everyone to buy Fast Forward to Hope. It's available on Amazon. It's available on Barnes & Noble. And related to that, there's a question, why the title? Why did you pick this title? And do you feel a sense of liberation after having written this and having it out?
Well, it's been a very short writing journey. I started writing, I think in the first week of July. It was like, this has been my COVID baby. And I worked through a program called Book Creators, and it's a hybrid publication, working with the publisher called New Degree Press. And the first call that you do in this program is with the professor who leads Book Creators. And it's a 15-minute call. He's working through maybe 200 students who've signed up for this course, and he's ready to move. And I came in thinking, I'm not really sure. Should I? Shouldn't I? I have like 5 or 6 different topics, and I wasn't really drawn to the cancer. I was more avoiding it. And as we talked in those very short minutes, he said, so tell me about this cancer thing. And I said, well, if I do it, it would be about trying to figure out how to fast forward for folks to not go through all the crap I went through, so we could get to the hope, we could get to the part where we could fight it. And he's like, wait a minute, what did you just say? Fast forward to hope. I was like, oh my, yeah, actually, that's if I was to write a book about cancer, that's what it would be. And so he said, okay, you're done next. And so the fast forward to hope came like that. It choosing to build the power of self. Oh my gosh, that was the journey for me.
Right.
Because what is enabled me, as I say in the book, is it's certainly science, it's humanity. I mean, the family support has been 24/7 in private moments, in every therapy, in every test, in every moment before and after. My friends, including friends who are listening from India, my coworkers, my sangat, my work community, strangers. This is why I know people are good. I mean, I know I have evidence. It's incredible, right? So humanity played this significant role. And then faith, we've talked about faith. But as I looked at all of that, I never thought about what is my role? What is it that I have to do? And we struggled. I mean, as a small group of us that I talked to, what should it be? My editors. And ultimately, I realized this journey is about my choosing life, my choosing to fight, my choosing to certainly do it for my kids, as you asked about the deal initially, because that's so much easier to fight for those you love than for yourself, right? We don't want to be selfish. We don't want to own and respect our own desires. So that came later. But choosing to build the power of self was really the culmination of the book. It came, I would say, moments before we published.
Yeah, it's amazing how that happens. All of a sudden when things fall into place, and you said, fast forward to hope, that made perfect sense. Not drag someone through your pain, but I think your journaling experience, because the book does read like you're writing it as it's happening.
Mm.
It doesn't feel as much as recall as in the moment. So I am feeling like I am at Sloan Kettering with you. I am feeling, because I live in the same area that you live in. When you describe Route 50, I know exactly where your doctor's office is.
Right.
So this is becoming this very interesting shared lived experience with you. And so I think it's very important for you to have talked about the crap.
The
It's
technical
very,
term.
because I don't know if there's a dictionary word for it, because it just
Yeah.
sounded like the most horrific thing that I could ever imagine on any given day. And so I think it has been important for you to really pull us through that. And,
That's it.
and so this is what I want to come back to this. And there are questions coming in about, family, and your support system, which you've mentioned, Sangat, and just your cousin Coconut, who got on a plane and showed up. That's what families do. That's what we've done. I know my people would do that. They'd be at the door. So, but just take us back to, as we're talking about all of this, going through this crap, and your diagnosis and whatnot, and you're in this state where you're 15 minutes late to a very important appointment that is going to confirm what you already think you have. But you need, this is a doctor who's going to perform a scan or a diagnosis, and I know the traffic that you have to go through. I know what it is like to be on the back in the day cell phones, calling the doctor's office and saying, "Hey, we're running late," and then rushing up the stairs.
Yes.
And you get there, and you're told you're 15 minutes late, you can't see the doctor, and the next time you see the doctor, it's going to be 2 weeks later. I read that and I wanted to scream. And I'm glad you put that in there. Tell us about that.
If I could go back to something you said as you were starting this part of the segment, and you said, you feel like you're living the journey with me. I think that was the only way I knew how to write this book. When I say I've written it with truth, I've also written it from my spirit. I haven't, I love writing. I feel great joy in writing. But this was not a scripted book per se, even though it was structured, right? And I say that because I'm grateful, because it is the reason that I chose to live it again, including that pain of shaft, that pain that I had mentioned earlier. Experience that again was because I was learning intellectually and consciously what I had learned subconsciously. And by living it together, I'm at least trying to share that process of intellectualizing it and understanding it with you as I learn it intellectually. So no, thank you for raising that. And I was also surprised my oncologist in his foreword raised the issue of the doctor's office that said, you got to go now, I'm sorry, she's busy, you're done. And he raised it as a doctor, right? Which really struck me, because doctors are human, right? If it was the doctor who showed up 10 minutes late at another doctor's office, he would have also been sent away. Mm-hmm. And, I do say it's their job, it's my life. And I really think that's important to understand. It's the system, but it's our obligation. And learning how to work that system, and not taking it personally, not getting sidetracked, not getting into a situation where you give up because there is one block or one more block that stood in your way. Not an option.
Yeah, again, I can tell that you are at this point where, and you've in this journey been able to get to this point where there's just this incredible perspective. I'm not there yet, and it makes me crazy. And I think when you said this was her job, but this was my life, or something to that effect, that really resonated with me, because just that feeling of, oh my God, another 2 weeks of agony. We have another question that has come in from India. Dr. Rupali Sarkar Gaur is saying your book is so motivating.
Thank you.
And she said, did writing the book sublimate your concerns and liberate you? Has it set you free in a way?
Yes, absolutely. Because, let's remember that, I had treatment on Friday. I have my CAT scans on Wednesday. I'm in a dynamic situation. Let's remember that for me, this learning is just as applicable as it is for the next person that I want to share it with, who may be dealing with something similar. One of the main reasons that I wasn't sure I wanted to write a book for many years is because, honestly, these are not things you share. You don't share your vulnerability to this degree. These are not thoughts I've articulated. My closest friends have heard parts of it, not all of it. I've certainly tried to I protected as much as I can my family from it. But then I realized the sheltering business was also not necessarily constructive for us getting past it or the next it that may come up. So my prayer is that as much as it is a release for those I love, as much as it is a toolkit or the insights may tap something in somebody else, I'm free. I have gratitude. And in a lot of ways, I think the book has also allowed me to express my gratitude, and it's clearly not comprehensive. I mean, the giving that I have received has been inordinate. And I think it's just the way people are with each other.
Yeah, and speaking of, here we are, we have about 4 or 5 minutes left, and we are acknowledging that it's National Cancer Survivor Day. And you are a living, breathing survivor who's sitting and talking to us. What does survivorship mean? You talk about the cancer ecosystem, and we hold space here today, and we honor those who are not with us.
Yes.
And so what does survivorship mean? Does it come with guilt at all?
I looked up survivorship because I had my own meaning of it. It's like, what is the technical term in the cancer survivorship? And it's living with, through, and beyond cancer. But, some of us will remember this incredible Gloria Gaynor anthem, I Will Survive.
Will survive.
Right? It's the music, and it's the song, and it's the words we've danced to growing up. I will survive. It is something that we have as much part of our ecosystem, the desire to survive, as much as our survival instinct is, right? And is there survival guilt? Guilt is a wonderful Indian emotion.
We own it, honestly.
We own it, and it's a useless emotion. If we've been given life, we should honor it. If we've been given life, we should find our purpose. If we've been given life, we should live it with gratitude and pray. And I pray for all those who are suffering today. And just with prayer, with positive energy, that we just lift the suffering even for a second.
Indira Ahluwalia, it has been my distinct pleasure and honor to be able to talk to you today. I see Manoj here. I'm going to hand the microphone back to him with many thanks again to the DC South Asian Arts Council for hosting us. So Manoj, the stage is yours.
I want to thank you both for this very informative and important discussion. And you both concluded in what I was thinking, and my next question was. So thank you again. I really appreciate it. Appreciate your time, your thoughts. And please look for the book, Fast Forward to Hope. And stay safe. And again, goodbye, good night. And please take care of yourself. Thank you.
Thank you.